All right, welcome everybody to our live webinar series, or How Can I Help You Right Now? And it's hosted by myself, Albine Simmons-Thorpe, business coach. And I also have today a guest with us, Mr. Sam Miller, who is joining us from Sam Miller Consulting. And today we'll be talking about mental health and the small business. I want to, at this point, just recognize our co-producers for this event. So we've got Startup Heal, powered by Startup Canada, Enunciate, a language testing platform, Albine Simmons-Thorpe Consulting, and ITS Global staffing and recruiting firm. Now, just a little bit about who I am. So I'm a transformation business coach with over a decade of experience in HR, operations, and strategy, supporting startups, scale-ups, and small, medium-sized businesses. I've earned the title of trusted advisor from these business owners as a result of my ability to combine strategy, planning, and action to create real results. And one of the reasons why I've decided to partner with the series is because for small businesses, it can be very difficult in these times to get resources and support outside of just the average suggestions or ideas or guides that are often provided. So this series is aimed at providing very practical, actionable advice for small business owners as they navigate COVID and post-COVID or post-pandemic recovery. And so today I've invited Sam Miller from Sam Miller Consulting, and he'll be talking to us about mental health. Not a topic that is often, dissected for the small business lens. And so I'm really excited to have Sam today share with us his perspective on how mental health actually impacts a small business. We always talk about employee wellness and employee health and, how that affects the bottom line, but very few times do we actually dissect what elements of mental health and how it actually directly connects to that bottom line in a context for either a small business or even larger businesses. So today we're going to be doing just that. So Sam is a resourceful psychotherapist with extensive experience in trauma response and treatment and wellness. He's worked with many organizations and corporations in creating healthy, respectful work environments, as well as meaningful work-related traumatic events. He's also an experienced facilitator, and he's worked with many organizations developing seminars, workshops, and those would cover a wide spectrum of wellness topics. So today, I am going to hand over to Sam to walk us through mental health and small business. Now, please feel free to raise your hand or hop off mute and ask a question as Sam goes through the presentation. However, we do have a segment of Q&A at the end, should you have additional questions as well. So Sam, over to you.
Thank you so much, Aldine, and thank you everybody for signing up. And as Aldine mentioned, I am a registered psychotherapist, and I'm based here in Toronto, and I've done a lot of work in trauma as well as wellness. The idea is behind all of the work that I do is creating a healthy workplace. And so small business is part of that workplace that I'm interested in talking about. So we're going to do this in a number of sections, so to speak. And as Aldine said, any questions you have, don't hesitate. Raise your hand, ask, join on the chat, whatever works for you. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is what's our agenda? What are we looking at or trying to talk about today? So first and foremost, we'll do a little bit about understanding mental health and illness. What do we mean by those terms? We'll then go to talk about mental health and small business. Are there issues, stressors, concerns that are specific to small business when we talk about mental health and just a healthy workplace? And then finally, because we are in the time of COVID and individuals are not only concerned about how they are going to navigate the present workplace through COVID, but what happens when we, as we are doing in Ontario and slowly in other areas of the world and other areas of the country, as we open up, as the workplace then becomes somewhere where we now are not in the safety, so to speak, in the confines of our home, but we're actually getting back out into workplace in whichever form it will look like. So we're going to address that as well. If any of you have had a background in mental health, some of this may be familiar. And again, I will share my contact information at the end of the presentation, but if anyone wants to at any point reach out to me to further understand what we talked about this or other areas of support, I encourage you to do that. So what do we mean by mental health, right? What does it mean when we talk about an individual being mentally healthy? So according to Health Canada, their definition is being mentally healthy is the ability to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance our ability to enjoy life and deal with challenges, okay? Traditionally, we look at illness from what we call the medical model. A very clear cause and effect. I wake up in the morning, I have a sore throat, go to the doctor says, you have strep throat, here's your medication, cause and effect, I take my medication. It's all doable. It's all something that we can connect the dots, so to speak. But what if I wake up one morning and, or for the last couple of weeks, I just haven't been myself, or I'm more sad than I usually am, or things that used to make me happy don't make me happy anymore. How do I understand that? So unlike the medical model, mental health doesn't just mean the absence of illness. So we'll talk about that in a minute. So if I am mentally healthy, I have the ability to feel, think, and act in ways that enhance my ability to enjoy my life. And what we're talking about is it doesn't mean all my ducks are in a row and everything's perfect. It means that when things are a challenge, when there are difficulties in relationships, in workplace, or just the everyday challenges of life, I have the ability to understand what's there, to process it, to think about solutions, to call on my problem-solving skills, and then to act. And I'm going to do that in a healthy way, in a way that improves my life. And in the event, and this is not an if, but when things occur that are beyond my scope, I'll know where to get that help. I'll know where to search and where to seek out the assistance that I need. So in a state of optimal mental health, we feel well, our overall mood is good. We can, for the most part, cope with stress. If we need support, we recognize that need for support, and we can achieve, for the most part, our personal and our workplace goals, without obviously the usual bumps in the road that we all experience. That's what we mean by mental health, good mental health. Contrary to that, when we talk about mental illness is characterized by what I would say a change in my thoughts, my moods, my behavior. Remember we were talking about think, feel, and act. Thinking, mood, and behavior. So my understanding of my situation, my ability to process what's going on is effective. And it will lead to substantial distress and often general dysfunction. And so I'm not talking about, we all have feelings of worry, anxiety, sadness sometimes. But we work it through. For an individual who's suffering from mental illness, these are frequent or constant, and they will interfere with the activity of daily life. So let me give you an example around anxiety. I am someone who has social anxiety or agoraphobia. Agoraphobia is the fear, literally translated, means the fear of open spaces. If I'm agoraphobic, sometimes I'm housebound, and because my perception of the world is within the four walls of my home, I'm safe. When I open up the door and I go out to the public, I'm in danger. I'm not, but that's my perception. And what we know about stress and what we know about anxiety and worry is my perception is my reality, and my body will react that way. So mental illness, for example, anxiety or depression, will greatly affect my activities of daily life. But just like illnesses, from the medical model, to have a diagnosis of mental illness, it needs to be formally diagnosed. So that is by an individual, a mental health professional who is licensed to do that. That varies from province to province here in Canada, and worldwide there are different licensing bodies that allow individuals to diagnose. So that's what we mean by optimal mental health and mental illness. But let's be honest here, it's not an all or nothing. It's not that I'm mentally healthy or I'm mentally ill. There is what we call the mental health continuum, the mental health continuum model. And what this model looks at and recognizes that my ability to function, my being affected by stressors in my life is on a continuum. So I can go from being mentally healthy or coping, right, in a healthy, adaptive way, to being affected by a life stress. I owe money. I'm in a bad relationship, to a more severe, persistent energy, like maybe a traumatic event that's affecting me on a greater level, all the way to a mental illness or disorder that in and of itself will require more constant care and support and medication. Now, this mental health continuum model is very important because it's a dynamic model and people move back and forth. And the idea behind this, and we could do a whole workshop on just mental health continuum model, mental illness. The idea behind this is that I can be in a mentally healthy state, even if I'm diagnosed with mental illness, meaning I have that diagnosis, I understand what's going on. With the proper treatment and support, I'm right back to living a healthy, active, functioning life. And it's important to look at mental health that way, specifically because it allows us, A, to reduce stigma, and B, it also allows us to, again, if we're talking about small businesses now, it gives us an avenue to support people who work with us or work for us, to get them back into the workforce, to get them healthy, happy, contributing, and productive. So that's a little bit of a look at the mental health continuum model. Now, there's a really direct connection between mental health and stress, and the reason why we're talking about it now, because as you'll see later, the stressors associated with entrepreneurship, with small business, are somewhat different. They're somewhat unique to them. We all have a certain level of stress in our day-to-day living. That's considered normal. That's considered, within our normal range and our normal ability to cope. But there are various factors that will occasionally have that stress build up, maybe more difficult to handle. Some will be psychosocial stressors that affect our ability to cope. When that stress becomes overwhelming and prolonged, it can really affect us. So, as a trauma responder, if I go out to the workplace and there's been a traumatic event, that stress is not necessarily going to create a person with a mental illness, but they're now dealing with that traumatic event. Their focus and attention, their emotions are affected, right? So there is a definite connection between mental health and stress, as well as mental health and our physical well-being. In some cases, there are individuals who have a family history or propensity or a likelihood to be more susceptible to the stress, and maybe that will create issues or concerns of difficulties in their personal life and in the workplace. So why is this important to understand? Why do we need to look at this within a small business and entrepreneurship in general and in our lives in general? Because let me show you some of the facts that maybe people aren't aware in terms of mental health, mental illness, and how it affects. And these are figures for Canada. I know we have a bit of an international audience, so for those of you who are not here, please just take the idea behind this is to show you how, intrinsic within our workplace, within our culture, mental health is. So at least 20% of Canadians will have a mental illness, although this identifies only those who have sought medical treatment, right? So there are so many people who are not seeking help, right, for various reasons. And when you look at that, 20%, 1 in 5, that's more than those living with heart disease and type 2 diabetes put together. It's a large amount. Approximately 1 in 5 members of the working age population are living with either a mental health problem or an illness. So again, when we talk about mental health, we're not only talking about these will be the people you work with, these will be you in your day-to-day work life as well. Each day, 500,000 Canadians, right, 500,000 Canadians will miss work because of mental health issues. And it's costly. It's costly to the economy. It's costly to our relationships. Depression and anxiety cost the Canadian economy approximately $32.3 billion a year, and $17.3 billion a year, respectively, depression and anxiety, right? And that's lost GDP, right? Our productivity is being affected. So overall, the cost to the Canadian economy is approximately $51 billion, and we're suggesting estimates are saying that by 2021, that will be 88.8, right? 20 billion of the cost of mental health problems is a result of work-related costs, right? Very much connection between stress, work-related stress, and mental health. But interesting, you look at the numbers there. Only 23% of Canadian workers with a mental illness would feel comfortable talking to an employer, right? So there's very much a disconnect, right, between what the reality is in terms of the numbers of people being affected and what's actually happening in terms of people seeking support, seeking assistance. But interestingly enough, 80% of Ontario businesses, we're going to talk about Ontario now, agree that it is equally as important to invest in mental health as it is physical health, right? And 80% of Ontario businesses agree that their organization's success is dependent on employees' health and well-being. But what you're going to see so shortly is there's unfortunately a real disconnect between that number and what's actually happening. And it's even more evident when we talk about mental health and small business. Now, before we continue, does anybody have any questions around some of the statistics we've talked about? Anybody have any questions they want to ask around that?
I have one quick question, Sam. So you shared some really interesting stats around the cost of mental health and the number of Canadian workers on the mental, experiencing mental health issues. I know you work a lot on the EAP, so Employee Assistance Program side, on the side of the companies that are providing that support. Are you guys seeing a reach out in proportional increases to those who are being diagnosed? So as we are having more people state that they do have mental health issues, are you guys also seeing an increase in the usage of the services that you guys provide?
So that's interesting. That very much depends on the organization and the culture within the organization. It's one thing to say that you have an EAP program. It's another thing to be out there and marketing it and making employees aware of it. The difficulty with any kind of mental health initiative within a workplace is it there just so the employer can say, okay, we've got an EAP? Or is it there because, the other end of the spectrum is it's an employer who truly cares and will do things like Mental Health Awareness Week, and we'll do the Employee Assistance relaunch, and we'll talk about confidentiality, we'll have webinars and workshops within an organization. So in those organizations where it is fostered and where it is talked about and is very much part of the workplace culture, and we are, frankly, as mental health awareness is increasing and as stigma associated with mental illness is where people are becoming more aware and more comfortable with discussing it, there is more of an uptake. In general, through COVID-19, we've seen a real strong emphasis in the media about talking about mental health and the difficulties associated with lockdown. And therefore, people are reaching out more. There are a lot of initiatives on things like online cognitive behavioral therapy or webinars for free. And because, again, the idea is providing resources to individuals. The other thing from an employee an employer culture perspective is if I'm an individual with mental illness, I'm only reaching out and accessing if I'm not, one of those. If I'm in a job where I feel my employer understands, but there are people who will not reach out because even though it's illegal, they feel it will affect their job in some way, either being let go or the quality of the job. That answers your question.
It does, thank you.
So let's go a little bit more into detail around mental health and the effect of it with respect to, and the support of it with respect to small businesses. So what we do know is that Canada, like many countries in the world, is a country of small businesses. So there are a lot of us out there. And I say us because I'm an independent consultant as well. So as of December 2017, there were 1.2 million employer businesses across Canada, where almost 12 million people work. That's a large chunk of the working population. 97.9 of those were small businesses, a lot of the entrepreneurs, right? Well, just 1.9 were medium-sized businesses. Now, that's great. That goes to our spirit as entrepreneurs. And it's interesting. There do exist a lot of efforts within Canada, with many countries, to support small businesses in many ways. Unfortunately, the discussion around mental health and well-being of entrepreneurs and small businesses is unfortunately markedly absent from all this activity. Right? Maybe now with COVID that will change, but a lot of the programs and supports that have often traditionally been offered to startups and to small businesses don't include mental health and well-being in that conversation. And part of that is maybe the stigma of mental health is still somewhat there, or there's not enough mental health awareness. And maybe there are individuals who don't know enough about the impact of mental health on business in general, and specifically on small business. Mental health, unfortunately, still is that elephant in the room, or the fly on the wall, that we know it's there, we need to support, but there's still a discomfort there. Now, there was a recently excellent study done by the Canadian Mental Health Association together with the BDC, Business Development Canada, that was just released actually in June of 2019, and it looked at Canadian entrepreneurs and their mental health. So it looked at mental health and well-being of Canada's entrepreneurs in order to better understand their unique mental health concerns, the unique pressures that they face. And now, this study was done, and it included a nationwide survey of 476 entrepreneurs, 20 one-on-one interviews across Canada. Is it indicative? I don't know if it's, if it touched every area it had to, but again, it's a great beginning because it's now causing us to have this discussion. So let's talk a little bit about what it talked about. And remember, a few slides ago, I talked about mental health and stress, right? Stress is a demand, and if we're not able to cope with that demand for whatever reason, it very much taxes our mental health. Entrepreneurs have some unique set of stressors that I want to talk about for a moment, right? Often, as the entrepreneur, it's a small company, it's maybe one sole proprietor. That individual, that entrepreneur, is often responsible for the survival, the success, and the sustainability of the company. It's all on their shoulders. It's a tremendous burden, right? And because of that, some of the unique stressors that they have compared to just if they were an employee in a company is things like risk-taking, income uncertainty. This is a great idea. Is it going to work? Can I draw a salary while it's getting off the ground? Is my small business enough to support my employers and myself as the owner, right? So risk-taking is a very unique stressor for entrepreneurs. Income uncertainty and high work demands, right? So work-life balance is challenged, and the need to make frequent decisions. And we're not talking little decisions. Often they're very consequential decisions. So if I'm an entrepreneur, these, small business, these can be very taxing on my mental health. So let's look at some of the findings in the study. Okay, we'll go through these. 46% of entrepreneurs experienced low mood or felt mentally challenged, right, once a week. 62% felt depressed at least once a week. 46% felt that mental health issues interfered with their ability to work, right? Because again, think of it, there's a demand, there's a stressor, it's overwhelming, my focus and my attention is on that, not necessarily on the workplace. But in spite of that, it's interesting, of those surveyed, 79% said they feel satisfied with their mental health at least once a week, and only 1 in 5 felt the need to access mental health support and services. There seems to be a discrepancy here. So I'm going to throw out another question to you. And why do you think there's the statistics on top versus what we're seeing on the bottom? Specifically, the only 1 in 5 felt the need to access mental health support services. What do you think some of the challenges for someone who's running a small business, an entrepreneur, might have, right, in accessing or feeling the need to access mental health or mental health support services? Anybody?
I can add here family changes. So if they've welcomed a new baby, unfortunately lost a child, or they've been recently married or recently divorced. So family changes, I found, is a popular one.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, we're going to get back to that in a couple slides. Okay, 67% of entrepreneurs were stressed about their business cash flow. More than 1/3 were stressed about adequately fulfilling their responsibilities at work and at home, that work-life balance. 36% stressed about finding the right talent for their company, and 34% experienced stress due to high self-expectations. Often entrepreneurs are very motivated. They're very motivated to do well, but they are very tough on themselves. And so that increases their stress level. The degree of stress, again, coincides with the mental health concerns. More than half reported experience feelings of sadness, feelings of inadequacy, mood, a low mood, a depressed mood. Yeah, so this is real, it's there. 66% of entrepreneurs have difficulty in maintaining work-life balance, right? So the work-life balance is due to that entrepreneurial stress, right? This is my baby, I've got to make it happen. I have to sacrifice everything or other things in my life. More than half reported stress impacted their concentration. 23% talked about personal relationships, but I will add, it definitely does affect interpersonal relationships as well. So getting back to the earlier question of using resources, mental health, EAP, community resources for coping, let's talk about the reality, and that's more than 1/3 reported taking breaks and practicing self-care. Self-care is great. I don't care if you're a small business, if you're in a multinational, practicing self-care is something that I'm always going to preach. More than 1/3 reported talking to someone, not necessarily a mental health professional. Fewer than 1 in 5 were likely to seek professional help, and fewer than 1 in 10 were likely to access helpline or use an app. So there again still is that disconnect, and the reason is there are barriers. There's always barriers to seeking mental health. There's the stigma attached, there's the cost, there's the time, etc. Let's look at those barriers though specifically as it relates to small business or entrepreneurs. the cost of mental health services, right? So if you are a sole proprietor or an entrepreneur or a small business with a number of employees, and you don't have an employee assistance plan or you can't afford one, mental health services a lot are not covered by OHIM. Psychotherapy, psychology, social work, some other initiatives are not covered, so they can be costly. A lack of access to support, or limited awareness, right? People just don't know. Again, going back to the medical model, if I am ill, I know what to do. I go to my doctor, but what if I have an employee who doesn't seem to be performing, and instead of coming into work and being, as part of the group as he normally is, they go to their office and they're really not social. What is my awareness? How do I figure that out? And more than 1/3 identified stigma-related concerns, right? Am I going to lose my job? How is it going to affect my reputation? How is my employer going to allow me to function when I'm taking time off of work? How is this all going to work, right? How is this going to be, right? It's a lot easier to talk about taking time off for medical issues than it is for mental health issues if you can even understand how to navigate the system. So, where do we go from here? And part of it really is creating what we call a mentally healthy, a welcoming environment, right? And how do we create an environment? It's creating an environment where if I'm someone with a mental illness or a mental health challenge, I feel comfortable to open up. Now, there's perception and there's reality, because more than 2/3 felt their companies demonstrated openness and transparency. Nearly half believe their work environment endeavored to reduce mental health stigma. But only 1 in 5, okay, of all those interviewed, talked about tangible, real access to mental health support or initiatives, or other, such as EAP or other workplace mental health initiatives, right? Only 1 in 5, a small percentage. So yes, I can create what I think is an open environment and a welcoming environment. I can work on reducing stigma in my small business, all very important. But if I don't have a plan, right? If I don't have something that doesn't necessitate the employer or my colleague or my coworker or my partner having to come to me to figure it out, it makes it very difficult. We also know that there are some groups more susceptible. Female entrepreneurs reported feelings of uncertainty and inadequacy far more than male entrepreneurs did, and that may be more a function, not necessarily of occurrence, but more a function of comfort with talking about this, right? Entrepreneurs whose businesses are in the earlier or the growth stage are more likely to report experiences of stress and mental health concerns than those whose businesses were more established. So 2 sides of the company is important. Entrepreneurs with fewer than 10 employees and earning less revenue are more likely to report stress and more likely to report mental health than those whose businesses have more employees and generating more revenue. Any thoughts as to why that is? You don't have to answer that. It's just a question I'm going to throw out there. So it's very nice. We're talking about mental health, talking about mental health support and small businesses. The question is, why? Do we really need to have that concern? Do we really need to talk about that? And my answer is yes. Why? Well, we know for a fact that workplaces that promote mental health and support people with mental health disorders are more likely to reduce things like absenteeism, increase productivity, and therefore, more economic gains. And I think this is specifically relevant to small business owners, even more than large corporations. Um, you need to think proactively when you're developing a plan for mental illness in the workplace, because the success, the sustainability, the health, right, of your small business may be dependent and is dependent on the mental health and the productivity of one or a few individuals. As a result, it's really critical that you're supporting those individuals. Right? It's a large company and one or two people aren't productive. Sometimes in a small organization, if you're not proactive and taking care of those individuals, it can have more of an adverse effect. Right? So what next? Well, in Ontario, we know that only 4 in 10 businesses report having a formal strategy for employee health and well-being. Only 35% of small businesses actually have a strategy on what their mental health and wellness initiatives look like. That's compared to 65% of medium businesses and 76% of large businesses. So what do you need to do? Now, getting down to the reality, and what do small businesses, what do entrepreneurs need to do to build a mentally healthy workplace? Well, number one, developing flexible and relevant mental health supports for entrepreneurs, because they might not look like the supports or an EAP, so to speak, for a larger corporation. We need to be sensitive to what those differences may be. We need to create tools to help entrepreneurs achieve better work-life balance. And I think these are naturally happening now with COVID, and when we're redefining the workplace and more people are working from home and we're more flexible with work hours, I think that will apply itself, I think, naturally to some entrepreneurs and some small businesses. We need to shift the popular view of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurships, which is, we're mavericks and we're risk takers and we can conquer all this. But we need to shift that popular view and even the view we have to be more realistic and understand some of these stressors, some of the difficulties that entrepreneurs have. And we for sure need to include in a very proactive way mental health awareness in education for entrepreneurs, right? What are some of the challenges you're going to experience in terms of your mental health when you're starting a business? Knowledge is power. Understanding knowledge is great. It really helps us plan, right? And there is stress, and stress is always going to be there. But if I'm aware of what might happen, then when it happens, I'm not then putting more pressure on myself because I don't expect it or I don't know how to react to it. So from a proactive perspective, mental health education is very important. If you are a small business that has, a number of employees, what do you need to do? Well, you need to be a leader in your organization, very responsive to mental health issues, right? Taking preventative action, being open, talking about it within your workplace. Supportive relationships between employees and supervisors, and open door policy. When we talk about the mental health continuum model, we often talk about the healthy, then being affected by stress, all the way to illness. And I often get challenged, if I'm talking about mental illness, why do I have to talk about mental health? Well, because the mentally healthy stage, especially in the small business where you're constantly interacting with few employees, right? That's the time when things are good. That's the time when you're developing relationships. So that if I'm someone who has a mental health challenge, I know I've developed a relationship with a coworker. There are initiatives there. It's very, very important. So now I feel comfortable to be able to talk. Flexible work conditions, where appropriate, is going to lead to better work-life balance. A policy of fairness and accommodations for those struggling with mental health issues or return to work, that's going to be a challenge. And obviously it's more of a challenge for a small business than it is for a large organization. but it's still something that we can talk about. Talking, being open, communicating is vital to dealing with mental health. And it's even that much more, in my opinion, vital when we're talking about a small business, an entrepreneurship. Okay. A lot to take in, but I do want to talk a little bit about COVID-19 and as a small business, what does mental health look like? What are some of the challenges that are going to be post-COVID-19? So we know when we see it and we hear it all the time now that COVID-19 has affected mental health, the mental health of individuals. When we talk about coming out of lockout, one of the factors is being in lockdown from a mental health perspective has had a very severe effect on the workforce. Okay? But it's not so simple to say now we just come out and go back to work, especially for individuals who are already suffering from anxiety. Because as we approach post-COVID-19 workplace, and let's be honest, we don't know necessarily what that looks like. But we need to address the anxieties of the people we work with and the sense of loss of control, right? If there's anything that COVID-19 has taught a lot of us is we're not in charge. And what does that not in charge mean for the new workplace? What does that not in charge mean for me, an employee in a small business, if I'm not comfortable to go back, right? So as we begin to return to work and we open in many, areas, many businesses, the anxiety and the fear associated with COVID-19 is still there. Let's not fool anybody. We're still in this and we're still concerned about it. So as you as an entrepreneur or your employees or partners in your small business are required to return to the physical workplace, understand we're going to have those anxieties associated with, for example, possibly infecting ourselves or family members. Also, what does the workplace look like? How is a modified workforce going to affect me, right? So we don't have all of those answers, but again, if we are and have created a workplace where we're communicating, right, then we're going to be able to talk about those anxieties, right? If I'm someone and I have an employee who's very afraid of getting infected, then part of both my return to work plan and my mental health plan will include being very careful, but being very open and communicative about how we are dealing with, for example, preventative measures to stop the spread of the virus. That's going to go a long way towards someone who has anxieties around that. We're going to get challenges about the new workplace. So what we know about change is that the more we talk about change, the more we understand the change, the more we see ourselves in the change and we can buy into the change. So too with this new modified workplace. And modified workplaces are going to be for small businesses like large businesses, as long as you're open and communicative about what that modified workplace is. And maybe sometimes in some small businesses and partnerships, you can discuss that together and you can formulate that together so that employees, co-workers know what that modified workplace looks like. They can start buying into the change, right? As an employer, you can support the mental health of your employees coming back to work by talking about a number of these tips. Accept that some anxiety and fear is normal. You don't want people not expressing because they think, oh, I'm back in the workplace, I'm supposed to not be afraid. Anxiety and fear is a normal function of day-to-day life. As a trauma responder, I'm always talking to people about emotions. The emotions are real. It's what just happened may be abnormal. So understand that those anxieties and fears are normal and relate that to your employees. Seek credible information and try to avoid information overload. Unplugging a priority, seek support, self-care. All these are really good tips, right? There's so much information out there. Try and seek out credible information. And I know I've done this since the pandemic started. I used to be the checker every day for the numbers. I don't check anymore. Right? So sometimes unplugging is just as good as the knowledge. I mean, that when all those numbers are things that I can't control. Remember, especially in a pandemic, in a difficult situation, you can only control what you can control. So don't spend your effort and your energy on listening to facts and figures that you have no control over. Okay? Answer everyone's questions. Be open. Have a plan. And start formulating that plan. And whether you can do it on your own or you need to seek assistance with someone like myself who is a professional will help with that. Develop that plan. Communicate that plan with your employees. If you have put into place mental health services or are aware of what's out there in the community, make them aware, right? Recognize that things are not normal, but normal doesn't have to be a terrible thing, right? Maybe we're entering a new normal, okay? This is just a reference to the two articles that I got a lot of my presentation from, and this is being recorded, so you'll be able to access that later. Let me just take a very quick moment before questions to just put my information on there. I'm a registered psychotherapist. That's my email address and my website if you want to reach out for clarification on anything we talked about today or assistance going further. So, Aldine, do we have time for questions? Are there any questions?
We definitely do have time for questions, for sure. So I'm going to give first opportunity to our participants to go ahead and feel free to hop off mute as I stop our recording here.